Hello and welcome to Business Today TV's pre-budget series, where industry leaders and stakeholders from various sectors discuss pressing issues that should be addressed in the upcoming Union Budget 2024-25. Today we are diving deep into the micro, small and medium enterprises sector, the MSME sector, which is the backbone of the economy. Joining us is Shachindra Nath, Vice Chairman and Managing Director of YouGrow Capital, an NBFC focused on funding MSMEs. Shachindra, welcome to the show. Let's start with a broader picture. This union budget is, many people say will be a landmark budget. It will set the stage for the next 5 years. MSMEs, meanwhile, as Business Today has also written repeatedly, are in a tough spot. For various reasons, yet they are the engine of growth, contributing 30% to the GDP. Now, what, from your perspective, as somebody who works very closely with the MSME sector, what are your expectations broadly from the union budget as far as that sector goes?
Yes, so you're right. I think so after this election, it is very clear, at least to me, that India and Indian people needs more employment. This employment needs to come in tier 2, tier 3 towns. Our cities of Delhi and Bombay cannot absorb people, and the only largest employer in this country is MSMEs. And one of the things which we think is that where the MSMEs have the biggest difficulty is getting the timely credit. Now, credit, as we know, is a function of to be provided by the banks, the non-banks, and we genuinely believe that when it comes to the underserved segment, NBFCs have done better job. But what we expect from this budget is to create an environment or create an enabling system which allows NBFCs, fintechs to prosper. And there are a few things which industry has been demanding. We have actually presented this to as a pre-budget things. First is creating a refinancing institution, because as you know, RBI's narrative is that the NBFC should not borrow from the banks. Banks have facility of RBI's on-tap financing facility, but NBFCs struggle with this. While they do this hard work of reaching to the last mile, serving to the deserving sector, but when it comes to an institutional framework of liability, that doesn't exist. So we have said institutions like SIDBI or a new institution should be created as a refinancing institution. Second, I think so there is a very strong need to create within the NBFCs, as we have microfinance institution, as we have housing finance institution, to recognize NBFC which are in priority sector and especially in MSME. So create a category of NBFC called NBFC PSL or NBFC MSME, so that the credit from banks and other places, when it comes to these NBFC, they should come both at priority rate. They should not be treated as any consumer or non or personal loan lending. Third, there are small nuances which is to give treatment at par with respect to tax deduction, like coverage of SARFAESI. Today NBFCs have coverage of SARFAESI only up to 20 lakh versus housing finance company has 1 lakh rupees. So, in summary, and last but not least, we think that to increase the credit penetration, government have to play a role. If you look at the COVID period and ILFS and DHFL crisis, when the partial credit guarantee and budgetary support came, the credit dissemination actually increased multiple fold. So, budgetary allocation towards creating a partial credit guarantee scheme and increasing the credit guarantee cover limits would actually expand the credit. As credit grows, MSME grows, and that is what we think so is in line with nation building.
And Shachindra, you talked about having a new refinancing institution. We already have SIDBI. So, what kind of a framework are you suggesting we should have for a new refinancing institution?
So, there are two parts of it. One is where NBFC should get money, right? So, today if you look at there was a time which is the pre-credit crisis in India, the NBFC 50% of their money was coming from the mutual fund market, 50% was coming from the banks, but after the crisis of ILFS and DHFL, the mutual fund market or capital market became completely negligible, which means NBFC have no choice but to become reliant on the banks. Now, obviously, the banks exposure to NBFC has increased and RBI is concerned about that because they think this poses a systematic risk, but we have to create a financing institution for them. Second, I think so more importantly, NBFCs is at the risk of failure at a point of time when there is a liquidity crisis, and suppose they have a repayment and the money is not coming, there is no place to go. A bank in India does not fail because in case of a liquidity crisis, RBI provides that liquidity, but that is not there for NBFC. So, as NBFC would continue to grow larger and larger, if you do not provide that safety net, the whole system is at risk. So, both refinancing like NHB is for housing finance company, an institution is required, and also a emergency credit line in order to match the liquidity. So, you have to create with budgetary support an institution of that size and might. SIDBI is there, but SIDBI is not a refinancing institution, it just provide term lending to NBFC, but that is not designed to act as an NHB, what is for housing finance company.
Shachin, tell me, there is also a talk about whether there is a need to look at the definition of what an MSME, those limits, and what constitutes a micro, what constitutes a small enterprise. Do you think that is a valid concern at this point, or you think that
I think so that got solved. So I think so one of the thing, and I think so that this change came a few years back and was a transformative change. First MSME, the retail trade in India was not MSME, right? So, a shopkeeper, in your neighborhood was not considered an MSME. Now, obviously, all of the manufacturing units, continue to lobby that, retail trade should not be part of the MSME, and finally, the ministry actually made a very nuanced change when they say for priority sector lending, anyone who gets an Udyam Aadhar registration would become an MSME. So, for government subsidies and government subvention schemes, they are not part of that, but otherwise, every small business in India is now an MSME when it comes to the priority sector lending. I think so there is need of harmonization should be done. Retail trade in India is as important as manufacturing. So, government schemes of what is available to manufacturing should also be allowed for retail trade. That is part one. But otherwise, as it has happened, identity of a business was very important. So, as Aadhar came for consumer, now Udyam Aadhar is for MSME and assist Udyam as actually, I do not think so there is any more change is needed. That is, I think so now is automated, banking system is fully well adopted. I think so it's well on course.
One other point which keeps coming back in this discussion around MSMEs is the fact that the MSME category is so broad. You have various industries within it. Whether it is small, medium or small or medium or micro, there are multiple. How does that work for even lenders like you? How does the due diligence work? Because this is a varied industries within that category.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. So, we say that MSME are heterogeneous by nature.
That's right.
I keep giving this example. Think of a lender who goes and think of a doctor, which is a small business. For a lender to differentiate within for doctor an IVF clinic and say a dentist is too difficult. These are though are doctor, but two different type of doctor. IVF clinic would have one patient with very much higher revenue, with a dentist will have much larger number of patient with lower revenue. So, in our classification, we do only for 9 sector and 200 subsector. MSMEs in India are in 189 sectors and around 1000 subsector and around 10,000 subtypes of businesses. So, the heterogeneity is of a very different mind-boggling nature, but it is okay. I think so that is that over a period of time, data stack actually is solving for that, and especially the GST, because as more business would keep coming on the GST, the classification of harmonization is automatic, because GSTIN give you that what type of business is there. So, I think so that is getting solved. What is not understood or where we focus, if you look at, we say there is 90 lakh crore of credit gap in India, right, but of that 90% is only for one customer segment, which is customer which is between trading turnover of 15 lakh to 15 crore, and that is what we call the underserved neglected sector. Banks continue to focus. When you talk about MSME, because now MSME is much broader, banks continue to focus on customers which are in the trading turnover of 50 lakh to 200 crore, 50 crore to 200 crore. There are a lot of small lenders which focus on new to credit, but actually these are the businesses which have some form of credit, which are actually adopting to digitization, they are getting formalized big time, but have access to credit is limited. So, we continuously focus only on this customer segment, which constitute 90% of 90 lakh crore, but in the trading turnover band of 15 lakh to 15 crore. See, there are 3-4 changes which has happened. MSME, the core problem, we are running this campaign on MSME, they call MSME Achha Hai, Kacha Chodo Pakka Pakdo, right. So, this is our campaign. We keep, the problem of the credit was because lending is formal, and MSME was informal. You go in 2010-12, if you go to and want to give a loan of 1 crore to a customer, and if the EMI is 15 lakh, customer would say 12 lakh would come from my kacha income. Now expect this, that a large financial institution to assess kacha income and give a credit was impossible. Now when demon happened and when the GST came, first behavioral change happened and now systematic change is happening, and this customer segment, which is the median 15 lakh se 15 crore, is adopting to digitization, GST, formalization, very rapid pace. So you will see explosion of credit and you will see conversion of the small businesses becoming more and more formal, because they will realize now that being in trying to save the tax is no longer possible, and being in the formal system gives you the credit, which means expansion of the business. So this generational shift and behavioral change is at a very rapid pace, and we need, as an ecosystem, the government, the policy, the regulator, the lenders have to provide more support to augment that, because ultimately that would lead to employment, and unless we don't generate employment, people will become unhappy.
And Shachindra, coming back to your point on this NBFC relying more on bank funding, and RBI also in a way insisting or asking NBFC to reduce reliance on the bank funding part. My question is, don't you think there is a debt market or the corporate debt market is available for MSME to tap? And number two, can something be done in the budget to promote debt market by way of some tax benefits or other thing, or maybe a retail bond market?
Yeah, so I think there are two things. I think so RBI is concerned of the banks lending to NBFC, but what get missed and they are getting clarified, RBI is also concerned banks lending to large NBFC, and that money is being funneled and used for consumer and personal loans, right? Which are also unsecured credit. What unsecured? So I don't use the term unsecured credit, because unsecured credit for MSME also get people think this is the same thing, but actually the entire focus for MSME to get loans without collateral. So what I call retail consumption credit, which even RBI definition doesn't include MSME.
BNPL, buy now, pay later, all of those things.
So first, I think the RBI is concerned with that, and that's why I said, if you create a category, and that's why we run this campaign called MSME Achha, because there is a general perception. If I ask you, what do you think about MSME credit? Your natural answer would be very risky. But data is showing that is not true anymore. MSME credit is no longer risky because business have become much more resilient.
But have you represented to RBI, when this risk weight thing came? Because like you're mentioning about this consumption part, the guideline was for all.
No, it's not that. So I think RBI excluded the priority sector lending from that. RBI excluded a lot of pieces of that. But look, as a regulator, when they see it, they look at much larger picture. So for them to then create these nuances and create categories is difficult, and that's what we have been saying, that please create a separate category. Priority sector is important for India, so NBFC which are in priority sector lending, please exclude them from this whole proposition, so that and that is because they don't pose the same amount of risk what other segment of the economy does. Second, your question on the
promoting retail
bond market, right? See, retail bond market is a function of so there is systematic changes which is happening. There are multiple OBB platform which has come, which are actually increasing the retail bond market. But retail bond market is also a function of your equity market, right? So when banks actually are now suffering not being able to get deposit, which was, India generally savers market, and we used to save only for two asset classes, property and bank deposit. When that is suffering, to motivate people, and population is becoming younger, to come to debt market is becoming little difficult. You can theoretically create any form of incentive, but there has to be a natural inclination to do that. I think so what can be done is, again I would say, if suppose think of this, if there is a sovereign support for NBFC which are issuing papers and they are lending to priority sector, and government says that we would provide the credit support on that, or it is guaranteed. In history of India, only large NBFCs have failed. No medium and small size NBFC have created systematic risk which is in priority sector. So if government or budgetary support is towards paper issued by these NBFC which are in priority sector, then you and me would start accepting that paper, because our then we will think that, oh, this is supported by the government, which means it would not fail. Why people continue to keep money in fixed deposits? Because what we believe that a bank in India would not fail. There is nowhere written in the regulation, right? but time tested, it is proven that whenever banks fail, somehow we bail them out, and that's the perception, that's the trust. The word bank is the trust institution,
and there is also insurance up to 5 lakhs. So
there is insurance up to 5 lakh, right? So I think so. You have to provide that kind of a mechanism of public trusting that giving money or putting money to these kind of institution is safe. And I don't think so that there will be any hit which government would have. If you look at emergency credit line, if you look at partial credit guarantee scheme, if you look at CGT MSME, there is no budgetary hit which has come, right. So all of that money finally came back. Partial credit guarantee, government had to take no hit. It was an off balance sheet support which government provided, and bank credit during period of IL&FS and DHFL crisis actually increased. So I think the government has to genuinely believe that their off balance sheet support would increase the liquidity from retail market and even banking market, and finally money would get dispersed to people in agri, in MSME, in all of the deserving sector, and finally people will generate employment.
Questions for you, Shachin. One is about digitization, which you said, and you are saying that there are rapid moves by many MSMEs to get into digitization, which is now a given. You have to.
Not by natural choice, but by force.
By force,
not by natural
absolutely.
choice,
Which is
but
why
by force.
I said it's a given.
Yeah,
you have to do it to survive. That's one. The question therefore is, what about the funding requirements? Because digitization is an expensive proposition to take an older business, which is many of these are smaller businesses, as you said, to take them digital, number one. Number two, it also brings me to forward the issue of skilling. Because skilling is a huge gap. When you speak about retail also, you know, whichever the size of retail, I think, and these are big job creators. So job creation and skilling, how are MSMEs looking at that in your view?
So I think so it's a myth that digitization. So I think so it's a myth that digitization is an expensive process. See, because we sit in a place and we operate from wherein we think the digitization means very rapid and heavy expenses. MSME actually, the digitization is very different thing. What is digitization for MSME? It is as simple as that, you know, to do your business in GST, file your returns properly. Digitization means that your Aadhaar is linked to your mobile number. Digitization means, you know, very simple things. It does not necessarily create an e-commerce platform and do that. Digitization means that India digital stack be present there. I give this example. I think so during COVID we launched this what we call the video KYC, because we said there is no need to go and meet customer physically. There is not to be done everything, you know, we can do everything digitally. 75% of our video KYC failed because the MSME's owner's mobile was not linked to their Aadhaar at that point of time, versus the same set of people were using UPI and making daily payment. The same set of people were going to Facebook, going to Instagram. So when it comes to our personal need, we are very digitally oriented. Even a panwala is digitally oriented, but in business we don't do it, but that has changed now. I will give you this example. I keep going back to, I think so we miss this fact. I asked this in my company that how many of us know this girl called Nancy Tyagi, right? And you know that she gone to Cannes, and look at number of followers she has, and look at where she come from. She come from a tier 3 town in UP with the amount of following she has, and she will become a brand ambassador for large brands, right? So that is the level of digitization. This Diwali actually, I told my team that we are India's largest, one of the largest MSME financer. Why on Diwali gifting we go to these large corporate, you know, gifting centers and buy from that? Why shouldn't we do it from an MSME? And we said wherever we are expanding, we were expanding in UP. I said find something very unique from UP and you know, buy things from an MSME there. Our teams were completely clueless how we do it. We have no view. I went on Instagram and I searched ITR. Because we are starting in, and on Instagram we found in Kannauj 120-year-old MSME manufacturing it was present on Instagram. I called on that and we actually acquired almost you know, lakhs rupees of ITR from him. Actually our team flew in over there, and every bank, financial institution and MD of a bank in this country got ITR sourced from Unnao, from a 120-year-old MD. So that is what is digitization is. the adoption to be.
And Instagram and platforms like this are helping that
Yes,
immensely.
of course. So today's MSME is very confident. The previous generation MSME was weak because he thought that his playing ground is only 10-kilometer cluster. If you go and meet today's MSME, because they think they are of one world, one digitized world. They don't consider themselves that if they are in Kanpur or Banaras or in deep south, their material can't be sold because they are selling it digitally.
Social commerce therefore is a huge
Absolutely. And social commerce, we still again get confused. Social commerce we think is only Amazon and Flipkart. It is much beyond that. And if you go and research in Northeast, there are two girls which have created a 200 crore cosmetic business just on Instagram. Right, so there are people who are doing that. So that is what I
call
call
India in that
this is what we call the new India. You look at how elections have changed, how media has changed, everything has changed. So we have to adapt to that. So our thinking is that MSME level of digitization, and that is where the skilling is. One problem with MSME is their inability to professionalize their setup and hire more and more people because they are still small family units and the talent is not available. Skilling part is a challenge, but that also I think so behaviorally every young kid in India, when he grows up in a small town, the aspiration continues to go to Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. As that would change, as the smaller cities would also prosper, right. I went to Rajkot after a long period of time. I came back and in my office I asked these people, please tell me how many more than 25 floor buildings would be in Rajkot. People said 5, 10, 15, but actually there are more than 100 towers in Rajkot which are more than 25 floors. So that is the new India which we don't realize sitting over here, and that's what MSME has to adopt. But we have to provide, I think so there is a lot of program on skilling which Government of India have. There is this JET classification skilling, but there is more need to be done. So I think so, like for Government of India, this one point capital subsidy for MSME the central scheme has been stopped. That has to be restarted. I think the one thing the government have to realize that budgetary allocation, both off balance sheet and on balance sheet support, actually finally would increase the tax revenue multiple fold. If you put 100 rupees as a credit guarantee scheme, that increases the turnover by 400 times, which means your tax revenue also goes 400 times. So I think so nobody in budget does this math, that if you put this amount of money, what could be the cascading effect on the tax revenue side. If you do these two math, I think so disproportionate allocation of capital support and budgetary support should come to this sector.
You talked about the government support. There is also a scheme for equity financing, this self-reliant, scheme. Can something be done there by increasing the allocation in the budget? Because equity financing is also very important.
Yeah, so I think so. Look, equity financing overall. I remember when I was starting UGRO, I have till date in last 5 years have raised 2,700 crore of equity capital. Only in my this round, which was almost 1,270 crore round, first time I took some domestic capital from family offices. Over a period of next 10 years, I would multiply this capital by at least 10-fold. But who would benefit from this? A US retiree would benefit from that. All of my investors are US private equity fund, whose ultimate investors are US pension and endowment, which means we are actually working for a retiree in United States of America living in Philadelphia. Why can't we create domestic equity funding institution? When I was starting, I went with begging bowl to almost every domestic institution, saying, why don't you give money? Because we have so much of money, but there is no such vote. So forget about MSME. For entrepreneurs like us who have 25 years worked and want to create a listed institution, I had no domestic capital available for me. MSME and small businesses, actually it is not there at all. While there is a listing on SME exchange is happening, some is happening, but for smaller, especially the business which are sub 50 crore, there is no equity culture is not there and there is no equity funding. So we have to create, when we think about capital or capital structure, some of that we don't see the result, and we, not every activity can be done for return perspective. You deploy 20,000 crore or 25,000 crore of equity capital just to fund equity pieces of MSME. It may so happen that we lose 10,000 crore on that, but the balance 15,000 crore would multiply to 1,50,000 crore. So that is the way it has to be thought through, right?
Sachin, you mentioned, interesting, you mentioned the SME exchange. Now, while it is a boon for the SME sector, there have been questions raised about the kind of activities which a section of market operators do. So, how do you look at that? What SEBI is, of course, clamping down on it. Do you think that's giving SMEs a bit of a bad name?
Yes, not SME bad name, but I don't think so that SME exchange is actually in true sense creating capital, base for SMEs. One, it's very small fraction. Second,
but it can be a good way to sort of gain currency for the stock,
yes,
and
yes, it can be, but I think so. How do I put it mildly? I don't think so that number of entity which is getting listed, and I am no expert. There are.
It's a fraction.
It's a very fraction, and only very fraction of them are actually in true sense creating capital. So it has become a vehicle to get high net worth individual make lot of money, but I don't think so it has created capital base. Think of another alternative of that. You create listed SME investment funds, right, wherein retail can participate into listed funds, and those who have then provide capital to SMEs is far better way, because first there will be a set of governance, there are a set of people who will manage that, retail public would get protected, and you still have capital vehicle for that. So I think so we have to create, as we have to create lot of debt capacity, we have to create lot of equity capital capacity. Just NBFC, if you look at in NBFC, roughly around $5.5 billion of new equity capital has come in. How much of that is domestic? None. Yeah. So that's where the problem is. हम अपने देश में काम करते हैं, अपने लिए काम करते हैं, लेकिन उसका बेनिफिट हम सब बाहर ले जा रहे हैं. So we keep saying Atmanirbhar Bharat is not just manufacturing. Atmanirbhar Bharat is, look at what has happened to public market. One of the reasons why India got de-linked to the global market, because the mutual fund industry in India and domestic market became much more powerful. So we are now became contrarian when FIs are selling, domestics are buying. That we have to do for private capital as well.
So listed fund, so what exactly is that when you're saying?
So listed fund, you can list in fund, raise public capital,
for
right?
Investing in
for
SME?
investing into SMEs.
Okay.
Investing
Okay.
SMEs. So that high net worth and retail public, which has very for them is.
I'm sure the private equity must be doing that, venture capital, private equity.
No, there's no listed funds in India.
Listed, it's not
There's
listed.
there's no listed funds in India. So we have, see, where are the pool of capital in India? So insurance companies, pension, insurance company are still not opened up. They are very, very conservative. Regulator thinks that they have to put money in most the safest haven, versus most of the global market, insurance and pensions put money into risk assets because they have to generate highest alpha. So which means that domestic saving market is the only market from where you can augment lot of capital. But you have to protect that for long run, which means you have to create an intermediation, you have to create a bridge. So if there is a great fund manager which lists a vehicle and raised say 5,000 odd crore, and then use his intellectual capital to disseminate that capital into multiple entities, is far more better way to do that.
We're running to the end of time, Sachin. I wanted to ask you, you spoke about Flipkart and the big e-commerce giants. And then there is the export part, the potential, I mean, the kind of major export potential which the MSMEs have. Now, some of these big e-commerce giants are also working with MSMEs to help them to improve their quality and look at better export potential, etc. How do you see that? Do you think that that is an important piece of that MSME?
Yeah, I think so. Look, so in India, like if you look at in China, the Alibaba, one of their great success was
small businesses.
Small businesses, and they became a bridge for taking a small business product globally, right?
Exactly.
Because a small business with a 5, 7, 10 crore turnover may have great product, but he can't go to US market and sell it. So so we have created GEM, Government E-Marketplace, which has now reached almost 5 lakh crore of total turnover. So I think so we have ONDC which is coming up. So there is a need to create a public infrastructure to expose SMEs and their product offering to global market. And I think so that should be also a part of an Atmanirbhar initiative.
Absolutely.
That how does our MSME through a platform can access global market, because these MSMEs would then will not have resources to independently go and reach global markets. It's just beyond them. So I think so that's if something can be done on that, it would explode the MSME market even further.
And sir, one final question on AI. Now, Gen AI, is seen as a tool, for improving operational efficiency and productivity. Can something be done at a national level where we can help MSMEs, especially on the Gen AI side?
It's a difficult question actually. So I think so the use of generative AI into walks of life is more fictional than reality as of today. I think so we have to just wait because I keep saying every time a AI platform comes and pitches to me, and the kind of, especially the AI is now controlled again by big giants. The cost of deployment is so expensive for a country like India. I am in my, whether that is good for our country, for where we have a 140 crore population, whether it leads to more employment or it decreases employment is the first thing to do. Can same thing be done by 50 people, which can be done by one machine? Should we adopt that or not? Second, generative AI for success of India has to be a public utility, because today generative AI is a private setup, right? You don't want in India to Microsoft and OpenAI to make money out of us. So if we have to succeed and make open generative AI successful for India, we have to have a public utility, a UPI or an NPCI equivalent. Then only it is good for India.
Like a part of the DPI.
The part of the DPI. Otherwise, my recommendation, please don't use this generative AI platform which is being again developed in US markets and being deployed and forced upon us. If you want to do it, we have all the skill set, we have all the capability, we have all the brain, develop on our own and deploy it free of cost to people so that they can really use it and improve, as we have done for the payment system in India. So we created NPCI, we created UPI, and we have just changed the world.
Now we are exporting it.
Yeah. That is what is needed to be do for generative AI also for India.
Shachin, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, and I do think it will be an important budget, not just for the MSMEs, but for the economy as a whole. Thank you very much once again for speaking.
It was my pleasure as well. Thank you so much.